Certification under the SSI follows a very clear and structured assessment process. When a site enters the program, it goes through.
So if we look at a PV project life cycle, and all of that, being at the end, all of the ESG is about doing ethical business, and it's also about building trust.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sinovoltaics webinar. My name is Rasa Yakaitis. I'm Media Manager at Sinovoltaics, and I will be moderating today's webinar on sustainability and transparency in the solar industry. As Europe accelerates towards renewable energy targets, supply chains remain heavily reliant on imports from Asia. With new EU regulations on due diligence and carbon footprint disclosure, companies face increasing pressure to prove responsible sourcing. So today, we'll hear from leaders at the Solar Stewardship Initiative and Sinovoltaics on how assurance frameworks can help the PV industry build trust, secure market access, and align with evolving EU requirements. Before I introduce our esteemed speakers, quick housekeeping rules. So this webinar will last for about an hour, and two expert presentations will take around 45 minutes and will be followed by a Q&A session. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the chat box. So please use the chat box to submit any questions you might have at any time during the presentations. On the same, at the same side, on the right-hand side of your screen, you can also see the polls options. So during the webinar, we will have displayed two polls. So we encourage you to take active participation in these polls. You don't need to submit your response to the chat box, but use the polls. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on Sinovoltaics' YouTube channel. If you don't want to miss the newest content updates on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Let me now introduce the two stars of today's webinar. So today we have Clara Segon, Assurance and Assessment Lead at the Solar Stewardship Initiative, where she drives the design and implementation of SSI's assurance system. Clara has over 16 years of experience in sustainability standards and responsible sourcing across global supply chains. And at Solar Stewardship Initiative, Clara supports the mission to promote credible, transparent, and responsible solar value chains through robust standards, certification, and stakeholder engagement. Today, Clara will present the story behind the Solar Stewardship Initiative. We'll talk about what it is, what are the standards and certification processes, and most importantly, why it matters. And real quickly, the Solar Stewardship Initiative is the first supply chain sustainability program designed specifically for the solar PV sector. It sets clear SSI standards built on international best practices and industry expertise to make sustainability practical for solar businesses. And of course, Clara will talk about SSI even more. Next speaker on our webinar today is my dear colleague Pierre-Yves Pridel. Pierre-Yves is ESG and Traceability Director at Sinovoltaics. He's a supply chain management and sustainability expert with over 20 years of experience across healthcare, consumer goods, and renewable energy sectors. He's also a former global supply chain manager at Nestlé, where he led large-scale transformation programs and sustainability improvement initiatives. At Sinovoltaics, Pierre-Yves focuses on supply chain due diligence topics. Pierre-Yves will share today case studies highlighting where in the PV project lifecycle ESG should play a crucial role and how it can benefit your business. Now, before I hand over to Clara, I would like to briefly introduce Sinovoltaics. Sinovoltaics is a Dutch-German company providing technical compliance and quality assurance for battery energy storage systems and PV worldwide. We offer inspections, factory audits, ESG reporting, and traceability audits for utility-scale developers and investors. With over 15 years of experience, we have audited more than 350 PV and BESS factories globally, covering all major components you would typically find in these projects, inverters, transformers, cables, etc. final note before we dive into the presentations, I'd like to take a chance and promote our newly announced initiative that will help people save thousands of CO2 in their work. So we are building a virtual factory tour platform that will host virtual reality ready 360 virtual factory tours of the biggest PV and BESS manufacturing sites across the globe. So this will democratize the access to these factories to all and bring transparency to the manufacturing process. I will pop the waiting list registration link in the chat so you can be among the first ones to step inside virtually to Tongwei's and J Solar's manufacturing facilities from your desk once they become available. And really final note now. So to better understand where your company stands at in terms of ESG and traceability, we have a poll that I'm gonna run it just now. So we want to know how mature are your company's ESG and supply chain traceability activities today. So on the right-hand side of your screen, at the top of the screen, there is a polls option. So please go to the polls and submit your answers. And after Clara's presentation, Pierre will address the results. So I'll give just a couple of seconds for you to answer before I hand over the virtual microphone to Clara. The answers are incoming. I see that the majority of people already have strong ESG strategies or strong ESG policies integrated into the business strategy. That's what we like to hear. Okay, while you continue answering the question, I invite Clara Segon for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Rasa and Pierre, for having me today. I hope you can hear me well. So good morning or good afternoon to our audience, and a very warm welcome to all of the people that are joining today and using the chat to introduce themselves. As Rasa explained, I'm Clara Segon, and I lead assurance and assessment at the Solar Stewardship Initiative. And it is a pleasure for me to open this webinar. I prepared a few slides where I will be exploring how the SSI is helping Europe's solar sector improve transparency, traceability, and regulatory alignment. But before diving into the details of our assurance framework, I wanted to take a few moments to briefly introduce the Solar Stewardship Initiative for those attendees today that are not as familiar. And the SSI is a solar-specific value chain assurance program. It was co-funded by a broad coalition of stakeholders across the sector. And our goal is simple, but still ambitious. We want to help to build a more sustainable and responsible solar future. But why the SSI? This is because as solar becomes a cornerstone of the global energy transition, our industry faces growing scrutiny from governments, from financiers, and society at large on issues like labor and human rights, responsible sourcing and traceability, and the environmental impacts of manufacturing and raw material extraction. And that's where the SSI brings value. It supports companies on three fronts. First, on compliance, helping meet evolving regulatory expectations and due diligence requirements. Also on reputation, providing credible proof of sustainability that drives trust, innovation, and market access. And finally, regarding collaboration, helping create a platform where stakeholders shape our standards and jointly address challenges facing the solar value chain. In short, The SSI is not only about certification, but more about equipping the sector to thrive responsibly in a fast-changing context. To follow up on my presentation about the SSI, it's really important that you know that we are a multi-stakeholder initiative. And this means it isn't just industry setting the rules for themselves. It's about a platform where all together with manufacturers, developers, purchasers, installers, civil society organizations, human rights experts, as well as financial institutions sit together. And this diversity of perspective is what gives the SSI its credibility and balance and ensures that our standards and assurance framework are not only technically robust, but also reflect the expectations of society and markets. So on the chart that you can see on the slide, we show how this model of governance works in practice, with structures designed to make sure that no single group dominates the conversation and that decisions are taken with input across the value chain. Another key strength of the SSI is the strong support we have received from international financial systems. On the stakeholder side, both the European Investment Bank and the Asian Development Bank are active members of our stakeholder advisory group, while the International Finance Corporation sits directly on the SSI board. And this backing from leading financial institutions is crucial because it signals that sustainability and transparency in solar are not just technical issues, but also requirements for access to capital as well as for long-term investment. We are also supported by major investors and developers, as you can see in some of the logos that are displayed on the slide, as well as from the quote here from Guido Agostinelli from the IFS, highlighting the SSI is recognized as an important platform for driving collective action on sustainability in the solar sector. We have a very much growing community of member organizations that make up the SSI. Our membership brings together manufacturers, buyers, and associations that are all committed to advancing responsible production and sourcing in the solar sector. And this diversity is also important because manufacturers bring practical insights from the factory floor. The buyers set the expectations for responsible supply chains, and associations help align the sector around common goals. Together, these members are helping us build momentum, credibility, and scale impact across the value chain. At the core of the SSI, there are two standards that were designed to bring transparency and credibility. These are mandatory for all SSI manufacturing members. The first one that you can see on the left is the ESG standard, which we published back in October of 2023. It has 96 requirements that evaluate a manufacturing site's performance in three key areas. This is governance and business ethics, environment, and human and labor rights. This standard certifies the site itself, and already we have 10 certified sites representing over 85 plus gigawatts of annual module production capacity. The rating of certification for this standard is quite simple. You can achieve gold if there are no conformances. You can achieve silver if there are no major non-conformances with a small number of minors and an improvement plan. Or you can achieve bronze if there are no major non-conformances, but up to 10 minors, again, with an improvement plan. The second standard, which you can see on the right part of the slide, is the supply chain traceability standard, which we published in late 2024. It's going to be a year now in December. And this is the first step towards showing exactly where materials come from and how they flow all the way from quartzite mining through all the way up through module production. This standard has 25 requirements, and its rating system also reflects both rigor and progress on traceability. You can achieve gold if there are no major or minor nonconformances, and there is full traceability back to quartzite. You can achieve silver with up to 5 minor nonconformances and traceability up to metallurgical grade silicon, or bronze in case the site has up to 10 minor nonconformances and traceability up to polysilicon. We are now very excited to be expecting the first certifications under this standard that will come later this year. And we believe that together, these two frameworks provide the foundation for responsible solar supply chains. A note around our certification system, which is designed to be comprehensive, and that means that it's not limited to module manufacturers. Certification is also available for upstream suppliers, including MGS, ingots, wafers, and cells producers, as well as quartz mining operations. By covering every stage from the first step of material extraction all the way through to the final assembly of a solar panel, the SSI standards provide assurance of sustainability, traceability, and responsible practices throughout the sector. And this end-to-end approach is what makes SSI certification unique and what gives stakeholders confidence in the integrity of certified solar supply chains. Certification under the SSI follows a very clear and structured assessment process based on continuous improvement. It begins with a manufacturing member site completing a self-assessment questionnaire, giving an initial picture of practices and systems in place. Next, an assessment body is selected through a tender process to ensure independence and competence. Then the site, together with the assessment body, prepare a plan for the assessment. And when the on-site assessment is conducted, this is the part of the process where evidence is reviewed and practices are tested. We use a triangulation approach that combines documentation revision, site tour, and unsupervised stakeholder interviews. After the on-site assessment, the assessment body submits a report to the SSI Secretariat, which feeds into the certification decision. And when a site is certified, a public summary report is published on our website, which you can access right now and read the public summary report for the 10 sites that are already certified. If there are any issues identified, a corrective action plan is of course required. And finally, we conduct surveillance assessments during the certification cycle to make sure the standards are being maintained. We think this step-by-step process is what ensures that SSI certification is both credible and consistent across the sites. Here you can see how the SSI assessment cycle works. It's over a 3-year period. When a site enters the program, it goes through an initial assessment in year 0. If the site achieves gold certification, there are no further assessments until the recertification in year 3. But if the site achieves a silver or bronze certification, there are annual surveillance assessments in year 1 and in year 2. These are very important checkpoints where the grade can actually change depending on how well the corrective actions and improvements have been implemented. And finally, in the same way as it would happen with gold, after when you reach year 3, every site goes through a recertification assessment to renew its status. This cycle creates the right balance, rewarding excellence while also ensuring continuous improvement where it's needed the most. One of the foundations of the SSI is that we have independent third-party verification. All official assessments are conducted exclusively by accredited assessment bodies, which you can see on the right part of the slide. These 7 assessment bodies are carefully selected, trained, and overseen by the SSI Secretariat to ensure consistency and rigor, and they are the only organizations authorized to conduct SSI assessments. Separately, on the left part of the slide, companies might choose to work with consultants. This service is aimed at helping a site prepare for an assessment, and it's a support that is entirely optional. And while we approve consultants who can access, for example, SSI training material, they are not endorsed by the SSI Secretariat. So it's very important for me that you understand this clear separation with assessment conducted only by trained independent third parties, which is what gives the SSI credibility and trust in the market. So you just heard me telling a little bit about how the SSI is building a credible framework for responsible supply chains, but I wanted to wrap up my presentation to help you understand why this is so urgent. So I brought a summary to take a step back and look into the policy environment that the solar industry is operating right now. There is a global shift. So across the world, governments are rapidly moving from voluntary guidance to binding laws. What used to be a good practice is now a license to operate, and also non-compliance means blocked shipments and reputational damage. Human rights are also in focus. In the United States, the Forced Labor Prevention Act already has held solar products at the border. In the UK, the government is toughening its Modern Slavery Act. And the common thread is that if companies cannot prove their supply chains are free from forced labor, their goods won't reach the market. There is also a demand for environmental accountability. Europe is pushing even further with the new Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive and the forced labor ban, which will require companies to show both social but also environmental compliance. In addition, we can see countries such as Germany or France also already enforcing their own laws around these topics. But it's also important to remember the SSI is a global standard, so we also need to take a look at what's happening outside of Europe and outside the US. And there is momentum beyond the West. This is not limited to Europe and the US. We can see countries such as Indonesia embedding ESG into renewable projects with local content rules. India is also preparing a mandatory ESG reporting and stronger due diligence. And even China is introducing green manufacturing and traceability in response to export market demands. So consequences and pressure are increasing. These rules have teeth. We've already seen shipments delayed or stopped due to insufficient traceability. And at the same time, we have investors and development banks like the World Bank and ADB who are tying financing to ESG and human rights performance. So the message is no compliance, no access to markets or to capital. And this is why SSI matters now. All this creates a very complex compliance landscape. Laws are coming together around human rights, labor, environment, or traceability, but regional differences make it hard to navigate. And that's why the SSI is here to help the solar industry prove compliance, build trust, and stay competitive in a world where the rules are tightening fast. On this topic of regulation, we recently hosted a webinar on regulatory landscape. It was done last week, so if you would like to watch the recording of this webinar, please feel free to contact us. And I believe that with this, I have come to the end of my presentation. I want to thank Sinovoltaics, who has been a very important partner of the SSI from its inception. I also want to thank the audience for your time and your attention today. And I really hope this session has given you a clear sense of how the SSI is helping the solar sector, is bringing more transparency, traceability, and responsible practices. And we'd be delighted to continue the conversation with you, whether that is about membership, about our standards, certification, or any other collaboration opportunities. Thank you so much. I will hand over to our moderator.
Thank you, Clara. Thanks a lot for giving us the insights on what is SSI and why should we care about it, and how we can, how companies can leverage the membership of the initiative. I now invite on the stage my colleague Pierre-Yves to continue this webinar, where he will present the case studies we've done for our clients. So Pierre-Yves, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Raza. And so I'm Pierre-Yves Bridel, and very happy to be with you today. Maybe first a quick look at the poll complete. So you should have on the right hand of your screen in a tab poll where you have the results. How mature is your company in the activity of ESG and supply chain traceability, from advanced to structure, initial, basic, or no activity. And what we see is more than 50% of the answer is the first two, advanced or structured, which is very much what we see the last few years in this industry. There's been a lot of focus on this ESG and supply chain traceability, and a lot of organizations have invested time and effort, have improved significantly. It's also what I've seen in many other industries, that the renewable energy or solar energy industry is quite young. After quite a few years of incredible growth, now it's a bit more maturing, and other topics like ESG are coming front of the stage. Maybe a few more comments is we see on the PV sector quite a high maturity in ESG and traceability. However, if we look at the storage, the BESS, there's still a way to go. It's also some products which are still growing, which have come now to maturity a bit later than the PV. So I will present you something which is focused on the PV case study, and then some comment also on the other components. So it is really a real case of end-to-end sustainability. So taking a client who is a lender, who is an innovative company in sustainable finance, going through their eye to the requirement, what does it look like? So it's a European company doing a European project of PV farms across almost 20 sites. And really, they are at the forefront of ESG and traceability. So to understand that is because they position themselves as in sustainable finance. There are also some regulation there, and they've decided, and they have to follow then, of course, the regulation, which means they have to report to the investor, to the authorities, quite a lot of details about sustainability. So it's also an important trend, and I will come back to that at the end, that in the finance, the sustainable finance become more and more important, more and more money, and then it does, by consequence, have a constraint or requirement on sustainability on all the actors along the value chain. So if we look at a PV project life cycle, so you have the design engineering, then the procurement, manufacturing, construction, installation, commissioning, testing, operation and maintenance. I have focused on those on the left before. Of course, you'll be selection of the site, preparing the financing. On the far right, there would be the extension of life and the end of life. But if we focus on what we have done with this client on these 5 steps, so on during design engineering and parallel to the design, we started with a ESG screening, which is a light ESG audit. I will come later on to detail each of that. Then during procurement of equipment, manufacturing of equipment, we carry out a detailed ESG audit to the manufacturer, traceability audit, as well as a complementary service, which is a batch tracking. I will show you the detailed. And then during construction of the PV site, it's on-site visit to do ESG audit during construction, and then after commissioning, during operation and maintenance, a second visit. And to summarize that, or to have a carbon footprint view of all of that, also for each PV site, a full analysis of the carbon footprint of the project of the site. And what Clara presented before is really at the heart of all this improvement of the industry in the ESG. And it's, for the time being, and I'm sure it will expand, it is really focusing on this ESG audit and traceability audit of manufacturer. So here what I present is beyond SSI, or beyond what SSI does, what are the other requirements or key points on ESG? So if we go through them one by one, first the ESG screening. So here it was the client had a short list of 30 manufacturers across all the different components, module, inverter, transformer, mounting structure. And it was about quickly gathering insight, direct contact with the manufacturer to focus on the key ESG topic and get transparency of where they stand. Is there any red flag? Is there any best practice? And at the end of that, have a short list of 5 manufacturers which were selected for the next phase of the project, which were the ESG audit and the traceability audit. So this is, for instance, on the right, you have an example of one of the summary of one of the output, the different topic and where a manufacturer stands compared to their competitor. So this process, in general, beyond the specific case, is very useful to have really a fast and efficient evaluation of a short list of suppliers to make sure, for instance, you know, the forced labor regulation is coming into 2027, and you want, before selecting a new suppliers or validating a short list, making sure that there is no such risk in your selected suppliers. But also, 1st of January next year, there is for the Net Zero Industry Act, NZIA, the new regulation in EU, there will be for public auction, for public procurement, for energy auction, member states will start to have some constraints on, they call it the resilience criteria, which in other words means the suppliers you select should not be Chinese. So you will have maybe to select non-Chinese suppliers, because today most of the manufacturing is done in China, and then to pre-select on non-Chinese, typically service is quite useful. Then once for for clients, this has been done. So next step was the ESG audit, traceability audit going on site. It has been explained quite in detail by Clara in the SSI background context where it is done. What we do is very similar. So I will skip that and talk to the next service after that, which is, in addition to the traceability audit, we also did a batch tracking. So whereby the traceability audit is describing and evaluating in great detail the management system of the manufacturer. How do they manage traceability? Here, the batch tracking is for this client, is for the specific order of the client, gathering all documentary proof for all components up to the raw material, up to the quartz side for PV module, for instance, all the purchase order, the delivery note, the receipt note, the bill of ladings, proving that the right material have been used, aligned with the bill of material, and who are the suppliers used. So can ensure there is no supplier used which are on the blacklist or not wanted suppliers, and give a full visibility, which is quite helpful in many cases. So it is beyond the example of suppliers. Typically, this service is a documentary proof of the chain of custody that quite sometimes lenders or authorities are using. For instance, exporting to the US, that's quite a high requirement under UFLPA to have a lot of details on where all and every component used in the final product is used. But also, it's ensure the client that only the components which have been agreed on the bill of material have been used. So it's also an additional quality assurance or quality step. So after this step for our clients, so the equipment have been manufactured, have been shipped to Europe, to the almost 20 PV sites, and there the construction of the PV farm started. And during this construction, one visit, and after this construction, a second visit, so it's on-site ESG audit of the PV sites, which are really checking all the major ESG topics for the EPC, for the developers, like the labor regulation, the health and safety. Is it well documented? Are the policies up to date? And it's gave to our client, who is the lender, it ensured them that the EPC complied with the norms and regulation. That the construction site was safe. Of course, like in most audits, there are always some minor issues, but here we didn't find systemic issues. So it was no same issue across different sites, so which was very comforting for the client. So at the end, for the client, it's also important because very likely in due time they will resell the site, that having this document, this report, increases the value of their project and makes sure that they will not have crises or ESG issue popping up later on because they've been tackled early. Beyond what our client expense, this service also is also a great way of, as you know, when doing such construction, the company, the developer got a building permit, environmental permit, and quite often in this document, some ESG or biodiversity or nature-related constraint or requirement documented. And through such audits, it ensures that it's covered and it's a proof that it has been taken care of or the due diligence has been done. Then finally, another aspect of sustainability, which is the carbon footprint. Now, in all industries, everybody talks more and more about this dual accounting. You have the dollar accounting and the carbon accounting. So this carbon footprint analysis we did, it was really a cradle to grave. So from the start of the value chain to the end of the value chain. So from the equipment manufacturing, including raw material and all the components, to the dismantling and recycling. So it takes all of that into account. And for instance, for these sites, what we saw is the CO2 return on investment is 2 years, in a sense of, for the developers, it's a very solid project. It means that for this project, the energy, the greenhouse gas emitted by the construction of this project is compensated in 2 years by the difference to the standard grid CO2 emission in that country. But also, it was quite interesting for the client to have this carbon footprint to see how they can improve. So we provided quite a lot of suggestions how to improve. We saw that on average, on the total project, the manufacturing of PV module is the highest contribution to CO2, but it's only 35%. And for instance, the electrical connection and all the cables is also a high contributor with 20%. And that was quite a learning for the clients, so where they can adapt on how to optimize the distance to the connection grid, the number of and type of cable used on the site, and so on and so forth. So this is quite important, especially for lenders or for companies very high on sustainability, because most companies now are publishing a sustainability report, on ESG report. And such analyses give them facts and figures and detail on what to report. It's also ensuring that, or proving that you put environment consideration first, and having documented proof that you do your due diligence. So in conclusion, one of the themes of this webinar, and what Clara also highlighted, is what SSI does on ESG traceability is important, and because ESG becomes more and more important in many energy projects. First, because of the financial background or context, more and more financial company ask, as Clara highlighted, ESG data, or that ESG is taken into account in the project, but also because of more and more regulation, which means that more and more of document and facts will be required to be compliant with those regulations. If we talk about strictly ESG, environment, social impact, and governance, the solar energy industry is quite far away. It's quite improved, quite mature. If we talk about transparency, so having visibility throughout the value chain, it is still a hot topic. It is still some area, especially if we talk about batteries, that still need to improve. So I want just to highlight that what SSI did and will do is very important. To progress in such topic, it's first, everybody has to speak the same vocabulary, to talk about the same, to have the same meanings. And that's what SSI has done very well for many years in defining the standards. So now we know what we talk about. Then it's also done transparently. Transparency of what are the standards, they are public. Transparency of the result of the audit, they are public as well. And through an initiative like SSI, it's easier to do it at scale. And all of that, being at the end, all of the ESG is about doing ethical business, and it's also about building trust. What we do at Sinovoltaics and what SSI does is trying having tools which build trust all along the value chain of the solar energy, so that each actor agrees to work with the previous actor and the next actor and trust one another. So now I think I will hand over to the moderator, Raza, for question and answer and maybe a final poll.
Thank you, Pierre-Yves. Thank you for shedding a light on how, shedding a light on European clients that benefited from ESG and traceability initiatives that we witnessed ourselves. Now, before we go to the question and answer session, we have a final poll to help us understand what would be the initiatives or actions useful for you, for your companies in advancing ESG and traceability. So I will launch the poll now. Please also again go to the poll option on the top of your screen, right-hand side of your screen. The poll should be available now. I see the answers are incoming. So what kind of support would help your company most in advancing ESG and traceability? And among the options, we have training and education, so that you better understand the ESG and traceability requirements and regulations. Tools and templates you would find useful. So practical checklists, reporting formats, or supplier questionnaires. Supply transparency, better access to distributors and manufacturers with verified ESG and traceability data that you find helpful. Then the third-party verification, independent audits or certifications to validate compliance. And then final answer, or the last answer, ESG materials for customers and investors. So like client communication support. And I see that the biggest share of the answers indicate, or the respondents indicate that access to suppliers with verified ESG data would help your company in advancing ESG and traceability. So thank you everybody who participated in the polls. We have 10 minutes for the question and answer session. So let me jump straight to it. And thanks everybody for sharing the questions. We received quite a lot of them. So first question for you, Clara. A question from Frank. How many factories have been audited under SSI standards so far?
Thank you so much, Frank, for your question. I can say around 16 different manufacturing sites have been assessed. The results of their assessment process are on our website. And if you cannot find it there, it's because there's still a decision around a certification pending.
Thank you, Clara. Another question from Solchem. Very interesting, thanks. Do you have a roadmap of the factories that will be audited in the next 3 years under your SSI standards? Question for you, Clara.
Thank you so much. A very good question and very relevant to the time we are going through with the SSI. So at the moment, it's not possible for you to access the roadmap of the factories that will be audited. We are building a digital platform with access to our members, so they will have this type of information included But a good indicator, if you want to have an idea of this, is look at our manufacturing members. Each one of them has 12 months from the moment they join the SSI to have at least 2 sites assessed under both standards. And after that year 1, they have to keep adding new sites every year as well.
Thank you, Clara. Another question. Question for you, Pierre-Yves. What components did you include in the project carbon footprint?
Oh, yes, great. Thanks for the question. So all components. So it was from manufacturing of the components to using them on site, usage during the 30 years of life of the site and end of life. So PV module, transformer, there was the mounting structure, the cable, the inverters, and also all the construction of the fencing, the roads, and so on and so forth.
Good. Thanks a lot, Pierre-Yves. Rather long question for you, Clara. Since the vast majority of the whole PV supply chain factories are located in China, what is the value of planned inspections conducted in a totalitarian dictatorship with no culture of transparency? How can you control the absence of forced labor from Xinjiang while traveling to this province is completely forbidden for foreigners? That's a difficult one.
Yes, thank you so much. We do like the difficult questions, and those are the ones that help us grow as well. So I would like to say again that the SSI is a global scheme. So we do have a majority in China, but we also have European manufacturers. And it's important to say that we do not conduct assessments in regions where we cannot have unsupervised interviews, for example. So we do not conduct assessments in this context. But how do we can be sure that there is no forced labor linked to Xinjiang in the supplies of our manufacturing sites members? We do this through the Chapter 5 of the ESG standard. The standard is published in our website. I would like to invite you to read it carefully. The Chapter 5 is the most important chapter. It's around responsible sourcing, where we have a set of very thorough questions and requirements when it comes to responsible sourcing, due diligence of their suppliers, KYC of their suppliers, and following OECD guidelines in terms of being able to identify high-risk suppliers and how to deal with that as well.
Thank you, Clara. Again, a question to you, Clara. Many questions for you. How does SSI make sure its standards stay credible and up to date? Do you follow any frameworks or approaches similar to ISEAL?
Thank you for this question. I'm a big fan of ICL, and we are actually in the process of conducting our gap analysis in order to prepare to become members, hopefully in 2026. This does not mean that we are waiting in order to put ICL recommendations in practice. These have been in practice from the inception of the SSI. So if you can take a look at our website where we explain how we design standards, you will see that we have different phases, like creating a working group with various stakeholders that will work on the terms of reference of how the project of creating a new standard or revising a new standard has to happen. We conduct pilots, we conduct public consultations, so we are very much aligned with ICL best recommendations, and we'll be crossing our fingers to be able to become members next year.
Thank you. A question from Frank for you again, Clara. To date, 10 companies, 85 gigawatt combined, is that considered a lot? Or is that what could be realistic and be expected?
Thank you, Frank. So to give you an idea of the importance of this figure, 85 gigawatts roughly represents the EU and the UK demand in 2024. So it's a really good figure.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and perhaps for both of you, Clara and Pierre-Yves, rather practical one. So with upcoming EU requirements on carbon footprint disclosure and due diligence, what are the biggest compliance challenges solar companies face today, and how can they prepare effectively?
I would like to let, I'm happy to let Pierre-Yves to respond into that, but my biggest advice is do not wait. You have to start now. Do not wait until regulations are in place. Otherwise, it will be really, really impactful for your organization.
Thank you, Clara. Pierre-Yves, do you want to react on this question?
Yes. So yes, carbon footprint, as I said, is becoming more and more important. So first thing is, if you purchase equipment, ask to the suppliers about the environmental product declaration, EPD, or the CO2 footprint of the product you buy. You will have a lot of data on that. Then, of course, conduct analysis on your site, on your project, to highlight where are the biggest source of carbon footprint, and then act accordingly. As Clara said, it's important to start now, because exactly there'll be more and more regulation, and you don't want to be caught short in a few years because you have not started the basics now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Pierre-Yves. Thank you, Clara. I see that we are almost running out of time, so I would like to wrap up the poll results, the second poll results. So what type of support would be most helpful for your company in advancing ESG and supply chain traceability? So the respondents mentioned that access to suppliers with verified ESG data would be helpful. Then also training on ESG and traceability regulations. So I guess webinars as today's serve this purpose already. Also checklists, reporting formats, and questionnaires would be helpful. We still have questions in the chat that we were not able to address during this webinar. So we will address these questions in writing and send to the webinar attendees. To wrap up this session, what I heard from both speakers today is that supply chain transparency is fast becoming a market differentiator, and those who can demonstrate verifiable, responsible sourcing will not only meet regulatory demands, but also gain stronger customer confidence and investor backing. And also, as Clara mentioned, summarizing her presentation, Solar Stewardship Initiative is there to help your company to prove compliance and gain trust among your stakeholders. So if you wish to get information or answer your questions about Solar Stewardship Initiative, don't hesitate to contact Clara, or if you need any advice on ESG and traceability for your projects, reach out to Pierre-Yves. I thank you, all of you, the attendees and the two speakers, for today's webinar, and we'll see you in the upcoming Sinovoltaics webinars in the future. Thank you.
Visit Sinovoltaics.com to learn more.